Day 3 of trial, done and dusted. And we finally have 12 jurors, but it isn't over yet. And the process hasn't been without plenty of drama. Plus, the judge scolds the media. Was too much information divulged about some of the jurors? Why one of them, dismissed today, said she had become afraid and intimidated. Another joins us tonight. And did Donald Trump violate his gag order? The prosecutors say he has 7 times, in fact, and they're pushing for him to be held in contempt. Trump on trial starts now. We have our jury. Those words today from the judge overseeing Donald Trump's hush money trial. 12 people have been seated. Day 3 started with 7 people seated, then the drama. One of the jurors asked to be dismissed. She said she was concerned for her safety after media outlets reported where she works. Later, a second juror was dismissed. There were questions whether he was truthful on his questionnaire. That took the total number of jurors from 7 to 5. Then, late this afternoon, 7 additional people were picked to serve along with one alternate. And this is what Donald Trump said after court.
The whole world is watching this hoax. You got a DA that's out of control. You have a judge that's highly conflicted. The whole thing is a mess. And you have the leading candidate and leading crooked Joe Biden by law. He's the one that should be in trial. He's a crook.
National political correspondent Alex Miller was inside the courthouse today. Alex, we have a full jury now, but the selection process isn't over. What are we expecting tomorrow?
Well, there are still going to be 5 alternates that need to be selected. The judge swore in a new batch of jurors this afternoon. They'll come back here to the courthouse tomorrow. They'll also be answering that 42-question survey that we saw all the regular jurors answer. And that is because should one of those jurors not be able to fulfill their duties, these are the people who are going to need to step up. And we just saw how important it is for those questions to be answered correctly. Juror number 2 dismissed, as you said, today because she felt unsafe. We now no longer can report where people currently work. It wasn't against the rules yesterday, now is today. Juror number 4 coming forward today as well, speaking to USA Today, talking about his dismissal from the jury. He was put on the jury today, or yesterday rather, brought back today after he supposedly put up political posters decades ago, ripped down political posters, and had a run-in with the law, apparently, including a deal with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And so when they brought him in, he was very late, over an hour late after the judge asked him to get there. They came back in and there was some bantering back and forth up at the stand. At one point, he even said to the 2 sides, according to our press pool, do you guys both feel this way? We couldn't hear exactly what they said in response, but he ended up being dismissed. It just goes to show how important it is to listen to these jurors' responses and to get the correct answers. That means that each side, they get 10 strikes each, that they need to make sure that they use them wisely. Donald Trump's defense team used them up much quicker than the district attorney's team, and they were left with a juror who had some pretty negative things, to a degree at least, to say about the former president. One of her responses today during voir dire, when that's deeper questioning, was that she called him selfish and self-serving, and said how he portrays himself in public is not her cup of tea. Now, they were able to get rid of some jurors who had social media posts that they had deemed questionable. One woman brought back in to answer just in front of the former president about posts where she called him a racist, a narcissist, where she said, I wouldn't believe Donald Trump's tongue if it were notarized. She was very embarrassed when she had to answer those questions, said, oops, that was bad, and apologized to the former president. She still was dismissed. But I do think overall, when you look at this jury pool, it's such a good representation of New York in the fact that there are a lot of people not from New York City at all, people from Oregon, California, Ohio, North Carolina, but then there are people who have lived here for decades, and when those people spoke about their experiences with the former president, they talked about really personal details. One man was happy that he repaired a hockey rink for him. One other woman saw him shopping with Marla Maples for baby clothes decades ago. And so you have this transient part, but then you also have those born and bred New Yorkers that are going to be sitting on this jury.
Yeah, and Alex, Trump's trustworthiness was called into question today. How was that brought up in court?
Well, it's brought up in a couple of ways. Basically, it is typically a professional courtesy for the district attorney's office to let the defense team know who the first 3 witnesses are going to be. And it's something the defense requested at the end of the day today. But the district attorney's office said, we don't trust your client. He has been intimidating witnesses. They have that allegation put forward. And so they didn't want to give up the jury names. They didn't want him posting about it over the course of the weekend. And Todd Blanche, Trump's attorney, basically said, we can tell him not to post. The judge said, frankly, he didn't believe that that was possible and denied the request. And this is on the back of earlier today, the district attorney's office coming forward and saying that they have 7 more instances in which they believe that the former president has violated his gag order. And just about 20 minutes ago, they put in more filings for this. There's going to be a hearing next Tuesday. And so you can see that they do not trust that he is not going to continue to post on social media throughout this. And they want to protect the witnesses. They obviously want to also protect the jurors. And so there's huge concerns there about disclosures of people's identities. Obviously, it'll be much more secure in terms of getting to and from the courthouse for these jurors once the actual trial starts. It is going to begin on Monday with opening statements. There had been a question of whether we would not have trial Monday and Tuesday for Passover, but they are going to be half days.
All right, this trial moving forward. National political correspondent Alex Miller for us live in New York. Alex, thank you. Now, out of a jury pool of more than 500 New Yorkers, we now have the 12. They went through more than 40 questions from the prosecution and defense. Kara McGee is one of those 500 New Yorkers. She was dismissed as a juror on day 1 because of the amount of time that this trial would have taken away from her job. But Kara, as you join us live, I know you answered those more than 40 questions. What was the moment like when you walk into that courtroom and you see Donald Trump?
It was surprising because I wasn't sure that I would be on that case until that moment. You know, it's Manhattan. There's always a million things going on. So I thought I could have just as easily been on a different one. And you walk in and you see him, and it's this bizarre moment, you know, because I had only ever seen him on TV. And at the same time, you get this sense that this isn't a god. This is another human being like the rest of us. But as he's another human being like the rest of us, we're all equal in the eyes of the law. So it was a strangely humbling experience, actually.
How do you process the possibility you were facing of being a juror?
So I was excited about the prospect of it at first. It's such a historic moment. I mean, as I'm sure you guys have talked about, this trial is unlike any trial before. It's the first criminal trial of a former president. So just being there to see that happen would have been so fascinating. But I also, you know, it's ultimately the judge and the teams of lawyers are looking for a jury that they think is best and that they think can be as impartial as possible, and that they think will be, you know, fully present as much as they can be. So if they don't think I was the right person for that, then I trust that.
We saw a juror today dismissed because of her fears that too much of the information about her life was now in the public. How aware were you when you were answering those 40-plus questions that the details you were giving might end up in the national media?
I'm going to be honest. I did not think about that at all. I think even when you're a potential juror for something as big as this, at least for me, the whole thing felt so anonymous. I mean, I still have it because I've been holding on to it. It's such a wild thing to have, but they blacked out our names on the jury card, so we were anonymous even to each other. So it hadn't ever really occurred to me that any of us would be able to be identified, obviously, until all of this started going on.
What was it like to answer those questions right in front of Donald Trump?
It was a bizarre experience. I mean, he kept a very good poker face, I guess is the word, while I was in there. At least it was hard to tell what he was thinking, but he was definitely watching all of us quite intently, as I assume any defendant would, as it's being figured out whether anyone has any bias that might affect the trial. But but it's very strange answering questions about a person by name with them sitting there watching you do it. It's really not anything like any experience I've ever had.
What was the tone in the room with the other people you were sitting with as they were taking all of this in?
It was serious in that everyone seemed to recognize the gravity of the situation, and if we had gotten that far to not excuse ourselves for an impossibility of being impartial by that point, then it did feel like everyone who stepped into that jury box had made kind of an agreement with, I guess, the American legal system, where it was a sense of, I am here, and in still being here, I give you my word that I will do my best to put aside any previous impressions of anyone I might have in this case and really only consider the facts regarding, did this one thing that is alleged to have happened actually happen, and keep it within this case and preserve the sanctity of our justice system. So I was impressed by the way that people seem to kind of step up and take it seriously.
Of the more than 40 questions that everyone had to answer, what questions seemed to give people the most trouble?
Oh gosh, there was one that said, as you would assume, there was one that said, do you have any former opinions that you think of Donald Trump that you think might affect your ability to be impartial and unbiased, which was, I guess, kind of the ringer question, because there was someone who was dismissed simply for their answer to that. There was also a question that I believe the news has been talking about for clear reasons, that was about, what are your news sources? What news programming do you watch? That seemed to be kind of a focus of the questionnaire as well.
You have had what a story to tell. I think probably for a long time that you were even involved in this. We thank you so much, Kara McGee, for coming on, a dismissed juror from the Manhattan hush money case. We appreciate your time and your insight.
Totally. Thank you so much.
Still to come, Donald Trump's own words could cost him. Still ahead, the penalty he's facing if the judge decides he violated the gag order in this case.
Weather now.
Prosecutors are asking the judge in Donald Trump's criminal trial to hold him in contempt. Under a gag order issued late last month, Trump is banned from attacking witnesses, prosecutors, jurors, court staff, or their families. But according to prosecutors, he has violated that order at least 10 times. Joining me is Scripps News legal analyst Michael Scotto. He's a former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney and the former Rackets Bureau Chief. Michael, good to see you once again. When it comes to this gag order, what ruling are you expecting on whether Donald Trump violated it?
Well, it's pretty clear from the papers that the district attorney provided to the court on Monday, and that was when there had only been 3 posts, 2 about Michael Cohen and 1 about Stormy Daniels, which would have been covered under the provision that Mr. Trump wasn't supposed to make any comments about witnesses. And then since then, we learned yesterday that he had retweeted a post that Jesse Waters had about a prospective juror, that there were liberal activists trying to sneak onto the jury. And now the DA has come up with, I believe, violations of the order. There's already a hearing scheduled for next week. And just on the face of the order and the allegations in the DA's application, it looks like former President Trump has actually indeed violated the order. There was some argument, I guess, today at the bench that was reported where his attorneys said, well, he was just basically retweeting. And therefore, this isn't a violation of the order. And the judge said, well, I'd love to see some authority on that. So, look, this is a serious matter. The DA is asking it to be held in contempt. At this point, the DA is asking for a monetary fine of $1,000 for each instance. There could be up to 30 days in jail. Haven't seen the DA's new papers yet, but, it's a serious matter. On the other hand, is $1,000 really going to stop the president from going out and saying whatever he wants to say?
Now, the prosecution said today that it doesn't want to share the names of its first 3 witnesses in this case with the defense out of fears that Donald Trump would post them on social media. How much does the prosecution actually have to share with the other side?
Well, all they have to share is the fact that they're going to be calling witnesses. They don't have to tell them what order. Basically, gentleman's agreement, you share information. I'm going to call these witnesses. It gives the defense an opportunity to, prepare and things move along in an orderly fashion. But, that goes out the window when you have concerns about the defendant, in this case, the former president, who has a large following in social media, where he's going out and talking about these witnesses. So, the DA doesn't have a legal obligation to tell the defense what order the witnesses will be called, and the DA is taking the position that, that's a courtesy that we're not going to extend to you because your client's, in essence, misbehaving. And frankly, the judge took that same position.
And tomorrow, Judge Marchand also wants to hold a Sandoval hearing. What is that?
Okay, New York, like many jurisdictions, though it's a little bit different, allows a defendant to receive an advance ruling from the court on the bounds of what they can be asked on cross. What the court has to do is take a look at what questions, not questions, but areas that the district attorney wants to ask a defendant to, basically show that their credibility is at issue. And they're supposed to weigh that against the potential prejudicial value of that evidence. In this case, the DA has identified 13 different instances. Some have to do with findings of the court in the Attorney General's civil enforcement action, 5 of them, in fact. 4 have to do with the defamation suits that E. Jane Carroll brought. 1 is actually relating to a frivolous lawsuit that was dismissed by a federal court where former President Trump had sued Ms. Clinton. 1, which I think is sort of out there in left field, is the DA wants to be able to cross-examine former President Trump on the fact that his organization and Alan Weisselberg were convicted of fraud. And then finally, 2 additional ones with regard to the Trump Foundation that the Attorney General moved to dissolve. So the issue is whether those areas of inquiry give the jury, first, you don't want to keep a defendant from testifying. They have a right to put a defense on, but at the same time, you don't want to have the jury not hear facts that will allow them to assess the credibility of a defendant when they testify. So it's a balancing act that the judge has to determine that decision. And on appeal, it's something that's a discretionary standard. So it's whether the judge abuses that discretion. So again, it has to do with whether these areas are, go to his credibility. And some of them, do. The question is, what will the judge allow and to what extent?
All right, Michael Scotto, former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney, Scripps News legal analyst. Thank you. A full jury is now in place in Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York, but where do we go from here? Up next, we'll ask a legal expert some of the key questions about the jury that could come up in the weeks ahead. Tomorrow, 5 more alternate jurors need to be picked. We did see some drama today, and what challenges could face this jury moving forward. Joining us now to discuss that, Adam Schlahet, the director of the Moore Advocacy Center at Fordham University School of Law. Thanks for being here. So we went from 7 jurors to 5 today, then to 12 and an alternate. How would you characterize how Judge Marchand is running this jury selection so far?
He is no nonsense, and he is moving at a very quick rate. It'll be very interesting to see how many jurors we have in the morning, because right now, as we speak, I'm sure both legal teams are scrubbing the internet, looking for anything that may indicate not necessarily feelings about Donald Trump, but are looking for perhaps misrepresentations that one of the jurors may have made. And that's going to be a real problem, and that they're going to need to bring up to the judge's attention.
You have this moment today, this juror dismissed because of concerns that she had over too much personal information being put out into the public. How can the court protect these jurors moving forward?
Well, the only people who have their name and have their biographical information should be the attorneys, and everyone has to keep that confidential. But this is going to be a long trial, and I think that every single one of these jurors has some real legitimate concerns. And if they bring that to the court, as long as the court is making every possible effort they can to preserve their anonymity and preserve their privacy, those concerns are just concerns that they're going to have to live with. You can't just pull yourself off this jury because you're uncomfortable. The judge has to dismiss you.
How likely is it that a jury could be sequestered for this entire trial?
You know, it does seem like that would be appropriate in this case, but, you know, courts are really hesitant to sequester juries anymore for almost any reason. If there's going to be a case that perhaps warrants sequestration, it's this one. But again, how could you keep people from looking at their phones, from watching TV, from hearing other people talk? It's literally impossible to completely shield these people. So if they can't be shielded completely, then, you know, why disrupt their lives so much that they're not even allowed out of a hotel room?
How strict is the scrutiny that this jury is going through, especially with their online lives, compared to a more typical case of this kind?
Well, I mean, it's far more because, you know, everybody, not only do people know Donald Trump,
right,
but they know Donald Trump in a way that they know that they've never known another celebrity, right? He's not an actor or a singer, right? He's somebody that we've heard speak all the time for the last 10 years. So people have real feelings about him as a person. And so, you know, it's going to be very, very difficult to find out people's true feelings in their heart.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Adam Shillette from Fordham University School of Law, thank you. And thank you for joining us. Trump on Trial continues tomorrow.